What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, we're gonna be talking about Static, Season 1, Number 6, by Vita Ayala and Nicholas Draper-Ivey. And in this video, we are gonna talk about the return of one of Static's greatest enemies, as well as what is the future going forward for Static and the Bang Babies of the Dakotaverse in this season finale of Milestone Returns Static series. We're gonna talk about all that and more right now, but first, if you wanna see more awesome videos like this one, hit that subscribe button. I post multiple videos throughout the week, plus live stream the Blerd Cave every Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So hit that bell button, that way you don't miss anything. With that out of the way, let's talk about Static, Season 1, Number 6.
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Okay, so this is the season finale of the Static series. We already know that Static Season 2 is well on its way, and if I'm not mistaken, we will be seeing it this summer as is stated at the very back of this book. So don't worry, it's not gonna be that long of a wait between issues. One of the things we talked about in the previous video was the induction of some of the Static Shock animated series characters into the current version of the Dakotaverse comics. These were characters that never really ever featured in the original Static comics in any way, shape, form, or fashion. These were characters that were mostly from the Meta Men and the Meta Breed characters like Puff, Onyx, Shiv, Talon, and Destruct. And one of the things that occurs in this comic that I found very interesting is just that Static, while he is up against what is not necessarily the most insurmountable of odds, really the only thing that's kind of hurting him here is that he has exhausted most of his stored energy in fighting Hot Streak, so he's kind of running on empty when it comes to taking on these recently returned villains. And while for the most part they're able to hit him with everything they got, in the end he's able to handily defeat at least some of them. And what I thought was even more interesting is that Static used what I felt was his most powerful weapon. And I know this is gonna sound corny, but it is what it is. Yes, Static is able to control the electromagnetic spectrum. He can manipulate electricity and electric currents and all of this crazy stuff in ways that I think people don't really ever think about. However, Static's most powerful weapon is his ability to appeal to other people's sensibilities. That's actually something that comes up in this comic, that when he recognizes the character Destruct, who back on the old Static Shock animated series went by the name Derek Barnett, or DB for short. He was the star athlete at Static School and he was pretty much known to everybody, but after the Big Bang he became Destruct and his body was for all intents and purposes transformed irrevocably almost into this weird glowy Frankenberry looking form. I mean, yeah, he can look normal up to a point, but it's not something he can do permanently, and he's stuck this way. And Static realizes his reluctance to fight alongside this new version of the Meta Breed and the Meta Men. Static appeals to his better nature, that Destruct's grandmother would be disappointed in him that he's doing this, that he's trying to kill other kids who have been affected just as negatively as he has. And this is something that actually galvanizes Destruct into backing out of the fight. And while the other Bang Babies, their reasons for doing what they do, they all come down to money, same as Destruct, but their humanity is a little bit more questionable. But Static is able to appeal to them as well, even if it takes going upside their head a little bit, to the point that when he takes down Shiv is prepared for Static to kill him because that's what Shiv was willing to do to Static. But Static reveals that that's not what I'm about. Static and Shiv are the same. Static, Shiv, Puff, Destruct, Onyx, Talon, they're all the same. They've all been negatively affected by the Big Bang, and it wasn't something that they did to themselves. This was something that Alva Industries did to them, and that the media and the government are trying to cover up, and that this shady government op is trying to use against them. And while some may not buy what he's selling, they at least have to think about the fact that they are being used. In the end, Static is able to destroy the shady government ops database on the Bang Baby, so that way they are not going to necessarily be able to follow up and bird dog and check up on all the different Bang Babies that they have collected information on. Static is able to basically unleash the full brunt of his powers. It just shows what this kid can do when he's got a full stomach. He's able to unleash a massive surge of electricity throughout the warehouse that fries every single piece of circuitry in it, and he still manages to maintain enough control, albeit he says it's difficult to do, but maintain enough control that he doesn't hurt anybody else, not just his friends, but the other Bang Babies as well. Static has basically saved all of the metahumans, the Bang Babies in Dakota, and he's decided that he is going to do this full time because he doesn't have a choice. Just because his parents want him to be safe, they don't want him getting involved in this. Even they have to recognize, just as he does, that the government is still going to come after him. Any of these other secret organizations, they're going to come after him because they know who he is, and they're going to be able to find him, and they're going to be doing all this stuff regardless of whether he tries to keep his head down and maintain a low profile. And of course, we know he's going to be getting a slightly more updated suit. Now, of course, he did get a new suit in Static Season 1, number 4, courtesy of his sister Sharon, but she has actually gone back and updated his suit, and now it looks even more like the animated series version, albeit a much better looking version of the animated series version of the suit. And Static, Richie, Frida, Darius, and Daisy, who has also kind of grown more into being more willing to use her special abilities now and, not being ashamed of them, they have become closer now in the face of all this danger. And Static is letting the world know that the Bang Babies aren't going anywhere. He hijacks the airwaves and basically tells them that you can come at us, but we're not going anywhere. And he says he's going to put it on blast that they are not the ones who did this to them. And not only is he going to continue to use his powers, but he's going to use them to try and fix the world around him. And I love that the other characters like Hardware and Puff and Onyx, can be seen watching on, and whether or not they're going to fully buy into what Static is saying is a whole other story. But in the end, we know that someone else is watching. The leader of the shady government op, G-Man, he is visited by somebody we talked about in the previous video. And I'm going to go and say it right now. I know a lot of people got mad because I mispronounced this character's name. I'm going to tell you why I did it. I think the name Ebon is a dumb name because it basically is just short for Ebonics, and I just don't like it. It's dumb. In any other place where you see the letters E-B-O-N together in a sentence, it's typically Eben, and I prefer it that way. Just kind of like how there's a lot of people out there who, even though his name is Thanos, people still say Thanos. So there you go. Die mad about it. Point of the matter is, Ebon, which, God, that name just sounds stupid coming out like that. Ebon is actually being inserted into the new Milestone universe. And the reason why is because apparently his younger brother was at that facility. The G-Man knows something about the location of his younger brother, Rubber Band Man, another character who actually hails from the Dakotaverse. In the comics, he was a completely different character. He wasn't Adam Evans, he was Carmen Stringer. And in the original Static comics, he was a villain, not an anti-hero or even an ally of Static. What they're letting us know is that while yes, they are bringing in some other elements from the old Static comics, they are mostly delving into the animated series as its canon, at least to some degree or another. It's almost like a mix of the two, but I think what Milestone is doing is that they recognize that of all of their different characters between Static, Icon, and Rocket, Hardware, so on and so forth, I think that they kind of recognize that there are more people who are familiar with the Static Shock animated series than the comics that actually preceded it, which I find sad because I think the comics are way better than the cartoon, but that's just me. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad idea because this is true. I know a lot of people who weren't even aware that there was such a thing as a Static comic. Most people, I'd even dare say 99.9% of all the people that I know who do know about the character of Static, they were only ever aware of the cartoon, which is fine. That's not a bad thing. It's just that the cartoon was just okay. I know a lot of people have nostalgia for it, and that's great, but I wasn't a child when that cartoon came out. That cartoon came out the year I graduated from high school, so I wasn't necessarily in the age bracket that show was targeted at. I never even actually watched it until years after it went off the air. And I mean, it's fine. It's a decent enough show, it's just not for me. Also, that theme song is just terrible. That said, for a kids television show that's trying to adapt a comic like Static, I mean, it does about as good a job as anyone could have hoped for. And it did come up with some really interesting things and even improved on some things from the comics. But in the end, I still think the comic is a much better representation. But once again, I totally get it. I totally understand why they're doing that. It's a smart business move to go with the thing that you already know most people are familiar with, even if that familiar thing is inferior. But regardless of all that, that seems to be where they're pulling some of these characters from, is their animated series incarnations, at least to some extent or another. But for those who are unfamiliar with Rubber Band Man, his powers are about exactly what you would imagine. His body is basically as elastic as a rubber band. The thing I'm more interested in here is whether or not not they're going to explore the relationship between Rubber Band Man and Static's sister Sharon, that is a whole other story altogether. Whether or not we see characters like Richie take on his animated series counterparts Gear persona, or whether we see characters like Shebang show up in this series, all of that remains to be seen, but I think it's more likely to happen than not happen. But I think it's safe to say that we can expect Ebon, gross, to be the main villain of Static Season 2 when it drops this summer. But anyways, let me know what you thought about Static Season 1, number 6. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.